Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And today we are thrilled to welcome a singer who has had 21 number one hits, has been ranked in the top 100 country artists of all time, was the national spokesperson for Folgers Coffee for 7 years, is the host of his own show on Sirius XM Prime Country, the T.G.Sheppard Show. Please help us welcome T.G.Sheppard. T.G., thanks so much for joining us.
Guys, how you doing today?
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So excited to have you.
Well, you've had such a long and storied career, so we'll try to get to as much as possible. But to start, you grew up in Humboldt, Tennessee. Did you come from a musical-minded family?
Actually, my mother, I think I got my musical abilities from her because she was the local piano teacher who taught every kid in school piano every afternoon after school, and music was always in the house. And then, of course, she was singing the church choir, and I would go every week to hear her sing. So, yeah, I might say that I grew up in a family that was musical. My mom definitely was. So I think anything that I have going for me in my life actually came from those genes that my mother gave me from her piano teaching and singing.
That's great.
Yeah. But how old were you when you kind of realized that the talent spilled over to the next generation?
Well, my whole career began at the age of 15 because I was a runaway. Okay. I knew then that I wanted music as my life. And my father was very strict. My mom and dad had divorced. I had stayed back to live with my dad to attend public schools. But at the age of 15, almost 16, my father told me that there would be no music in our house and that I would be following in his footsteps in the heavy equipment business, bulldozers, graders, combines. So at the age of 15, with 2 quarters and a dime, 60 cents, I climbed out of the back window of my dad's house.
Wow.
And I hitchhiked to Memphis and lived in the alleyways of Beale Street and ate out of garbage cans for months to survive. And that's when I knew that music would be my life, was when I ran away from home at 15. And that's when I met Elvis. And of course, everything changed after that.
Well, you mentioned, what's going through your mind at 15 to leave home? I mean, how scary is that for you at the time? And were you contacted at all by your family that, looking for you at that point?
No, no one knew where I was. I did reach out to my mom, when I got to Memphis because she was living there, but she had remarried, and it was horrifying. I mean, when you're on your own at almost 16 and you have nowhere to live, but you have a dream inside of you that you have got to try to fulfill. I knew if I stayed with it and I stayed on course that maybe I could reach and grab the brass ring someday. And lo and behold, I stayed in it and stayed with it long enough, dreaming that it did happen for me. It happened 15 years later when I turned 30 years old that I had my first number one hit. But I stayed true to the course for 15 years of scuffling and trying and dreaming, and it was an incredible journey. My whole life has been an incredible journey that I have been on, but I was very fortunate to have had my dream come true, thanks to God and my belief in Him. And so it's been a heck of a ride.
Yeah. So in those early years, so how did you get by, living? You said you're just living on the street all those time in those early years?
No, not all of those years. The first couple of years of when I left home at 16, or almost 16. I was sleeping wherever I could, a park bench, a breezeway of an office building, between the main door and the lobby door. It was warm in there in the winter, and I would sleep in there on the floor and roll my jacket up and then go try to find something to eat somewhere. But then I finally got to working in local bands and making a little bit of money that at least afforded me the luxury of having some food to eat. But at the age of 16, when I met Elvis at a roller rink one night, that kind of altered my career and my life, because then he became my friend. And I wound up spending a lot of years at Graceland. So I had a place to go.
My God. Well, looking at your bio, you opened for some of the biggest acts back then. I mean, Jan and Dean, the Animals, the Beach Boys. How did all that come about for you?
Well, I was in local bands, and I had wound up being in a band with a guy called Travis Womack, who had a recording contract and had a hit record. And we would open for the Beach Boys. And I had to pinch myself. I was singing back up, playing the tambourine, which I was very good at the tambourine, and playing saxophone. I played tenor and alto sax. So those days of working with those rock and roll bands and stuff, that's when I was trying to be a rock and roll star. It never happened for me in pop music. I tried. It actually happened for me when I was in my early 30s through the encouragement of a guy named Waylon Jennings, who was an artist that I was working with, because at that point I was an executive at RCA Victor Records in New York. And through his encouragement, I became a recording artist in country music.
So you briefly, you started talking about that now. You briefly abandoned your career to get involved in music promotion. So what kind of things did you have to do in music promotion? And is there a different sort of pressure when you're responsible for someone else's career besides your own?
Yeah, there is. And of course, being in record promotion and working with the radio stations to get them to play other artists' records, at least I was getting a chance to fulfill part of my dream of being an artist through the eyes of other artists like Neil Diamond and John Denver and Waylon and Charlie Pride and Elvis. And so I was living the dream, but through their eyes. At that point, I had not had my first hit record. And when that first hit came, when I was 30, then it all changed. Everything really started happening when I was around 30, but it took 15 years from running away from home to get to that point. But in the record business, it was really and truly a great way to learn the business and learn how it worked.
Oh, sure. I can imagine.
An artist needs to treat their career as a business. And so being a record executive, I learned the ins and outs of the business and how important the business is to an artist.
So then in the 70s, you were signed to Motown's country label, Melodyland. How did that come about, and was Berry Gordy involved in it?
Berry Gordy gave me my first major contract. And it was a new country division that Motown was forming in Nashville called Melodyland. And they heard a song that I had demoed. I had demoed a song called Devil in the Bottle, and I thought it was a hit. And I sent it to every major label, and they all turned it down, thinking it was not a hit. But I was playing the song for another label in Nashville. And on the other side of the wall in another office was Motown's new country division that had just opened up. And they heard me playing the song for another label who had just turned it down. And when I got ready to leave that label's office, I walked out of the door and a guy grabbed me and he said, "Is that you singing on the song I just heard through the wall?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I want to sign you as an artist to Motown's new label, Melodyland. I'm going to call Berry Gordy right now. So we get on the phone with Berry Gordy, and of course, I was a big fan of all the Motown music. And that's how it happened. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And it was just meant to be. And that's how my life and career started.
Do they give you any reason for not liking the song? Do they say they just said it's not a hit and then just that's it?
They just didn't think it was a hit. And I got to tell you a great story that I told only once or twice. It goes to show that if you believe in something strong enough, just stick with it. I remember the day that Devil in the Bottle finally came out on Motown, and it went #1 in Billboard and also top 30 in the pop charts. Mm-hmm. And I ran to my mailbox the day that my billboard was arriving so that I could open it up and see my name at the top of the Billboard chart at #1. And I reached in there and I opened it up, but also in that same mailbox was a package that had been returned to me from a recording label. And I opened it up and they had returned my tape saying that they did not feel The Devil in the Bottle was a hit record. They sent it back to me. So in one hand, I had Devil in the Bottle as #1 in the United States. And in the other hand was a rejection on the same song in the mailbox. So it was an incredible day. So it just goes to show you that sometimes if you just stick to your guns, you can get lucky.
Or that executives know nothing.
It was really a surreal day for me.
Sure.
So,
well, yeah, but I mean, this is the things I love about about artists and the artistic process. And yes, you do. You absolutely 100% have to believe in if you feel strongly about something, you can't let it go because there's a reason for that. And it's with as many stories as I've heard like this, I'm always excited and fascinated when I hear another one, especially as incredible as that. So how satisfying is it at that point that it had been turned down so many times? I mean, is there a part of you that was tempted to call them back and say, or at least the one you had the package in your hand, send them the copy of Billboard?
Well, I had a chance through the years after that to get a chance to most all of those labels that would, and it's funny how when you finally become a hit artist, those labels will come back and say, well, we know, we knew you was going to do it. We knew you was going to make it. And so my answer is, well, why didn't you sign me? Why didn't you give me a chance? It was really great to be able to run into a lot of those record executives at award shows and things when I was winning awards and have those same people walk up to me and say, man, we should have signed you, I guess. I said, well, I'm thanking you for not signing me, because if I hadn't wound up where I was, I might never have had that hit record. So
yeah, wow.
It was all meant to be. It was all written in the book long before I ever came along. It was predestined.
Well, after all you went through, I mean, what's that feeling like the first time you hear your song on the radio? What's that feeling it for you?
That was another moment. I mean, I remember, turning the radio on, running down the highway. I knew that it had been sent out to radio stations. And all of a sudden, I'm in the car and I hear my song on the radio, and I didn't recognize it immediately. I just knew, gosh, that song sounds familiar. Oh, that's me. So it was such a feeling of accomplishment. It was the frosting on the cake for me after waiting so long to try to get a break. And I even tell people to this day in our meet and greets and autograph lines, people will say to me, how do I have my dream come true? And my answer to them is just never take no for an answer. Just going. Some people will come up to me in the autograph line and say, I wanted to be a singer like you, but it passed me. I am at an age now to where my dream cannot be fulfilled. And my answer to those people is this: it's never too late, no matter how old you are. It's never too late in life to be who you might have been.
That's
So
great.
keep dreaming. That's my main answer to people. It's never too late to be who you might have been.
Wow. Well, you already mentioned your friendship with Elvis, but we'd like to ask a little bit more about it. How did that actually happen, meeting him? I mean, what was that like, and how did it unfold?
Well, I had a friend who was working at a skating rink in Memphis, and he let me come skate free. This is when I was sleeping in the alleys and eating out of garbage cans. And I went late one night and skated free. And I'm standing outside the roller rink at around midnight, 1 a.m. And they'd cut the lights off outside. And so all of a sudden, as I'm standing there figuring out where I'm going to go spend the night, and luckily I did have a place to go that night, a friend's house. They let me sleep there. 2 or 3 Cadillacs pull up at the skating rink, and I'm standing there, and Elvis gets out from behind the wheel of the lead Cadillac and walks over right up to me with those steel blue eyes. And he says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm leaving. They're closing the rink down." He said, "Oh, no, they're opening it up for me." I said, and I'm in shock because I'm speaking to Elvis Presley, and I'm going, are you talking to me? And he asked me, he said, "I'm a man short on my team. Will you come inside and skate with us?" And I said, "Are you kidding me?" "Yeah, I'd be tickled to death to." I went inside and roller skated with Elvis on his team, and we played a game called Kill on roller skates. It was football on skates.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it was it was messy. I'm telling you, could get hurt pretty bad. And so after we skated for till around 4 o'clock in the morning, he looked at me and he said, "Are you hungry?" And I said, in those days I was always hungry. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come on, let's go up to the Graceland and have a bite to eat." Again, I'm in shock, and I'm going, no way, that this is not happening. I get in the car, and Elvis is driving up the driveway, and I'm having to pinch myself, thinking I'm going to wake up at any minute and this will all have been a dream. And it didn't happen. We got into Graceland, and we had the famous peanut butter and banana sandwich. I had 3 of them because I was starving to death. And then after sitting around listening to some music and playing, shooting some pool and just talking, and I said, "Well, I guess I'd better be leaving. It's 6 o'clock in the morning now." And he said, "Do you have a number we can reach you at?" And I did know the phone number of where I was going to spend that night. And I gave the number to him, thinking to myself, he'll never remember who I was. No one will ever believe that I was here and met him. Lo and behold, the next day, the phone rings, and it's Charlie Hodge, who worked for Elvis. And he said, "Elvis wants to know if you want to go to the movies tonight." I said, "Are you kidding me?" I'm thinking he remembered me. And sure enough, I wound up going to the movies that night with Elvis and seeing the movie. And after that first night at the rink and the second night at the movie theater, I was a friend of Elvis's until the day he passed.
Wow.
And it was just the most incredible friendship that I ever had. He was the most down-to-earth, non-egotistical person I've ever met. He had no ego. He was just a guy who appreciated his fame, loved his fans, and was a very spiritual guy. And that really kind of guided my spiritual existence on this planet.
So, I mean, what's that like just for you? You started mentioning it. How surreal is it from a kid from a small town just to be like, did you have to pinch yourself all the time? Like you're hanging with arguably one of the most, if not the most famous musical performers of all time. So what's that like just for you? What was he like in general?
Well, he was just a guy like we are. I mean, we would just sit around and talk and tell jokes and laugh. He loved to laugh. He had the greatest laugh of any human being I ever heard. And we would talk about just daily stuff. He would often sit down with me and quote me the scriptures in the Bible and tell me his interpretation of the scriptures.
Wow.
He was an avid reader. He always kept several books going because he loved to read books. He loved television. I remember seeing my first VCR machine that you could tape TV shows.
Oh,
Oops.
uh-oh.
Guys, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly's computer went dead on us, or something happened. So you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, let's pick it up from right there. Yeah.
100%. That VCR. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I remember the first time I ever saw a VCR was at Elvis's. And of course, RCA had put, I think, one of the first ones out. And I walked in one night and Elvis kept playing this TV show over and over. And I'm going, how'd you do that? He said, well, it's a new thing that RCA sent me called a VCR machine. And you put a tape in and you can tape anything on TV. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. Of course, Elvis got everything first because he was Elvis Presley. But no, we would, I don't know how I got off on the VCR machine, but just hanging with Elvis was just always exciting because, I mean, he lived in his own world that he built for himself. And I mean, not being able to get out in public and be seen, he created his own world. And so therefore, in his world, the day would begin around 5 or 6 in the afternoon because he would sleep during the day and would stay up all night. He was a night owl. I used to call him Dracula. I said, so you better get to bed, the sun's coming up. And so, but in his world, he would go and rent the movie theater for movies. He would rent fairgrounds for us to go ride rides all night long, or he would rent out a racquetball court because he loved to play racquetball. And so he had that power to do whatever he wanted, and the world stopped for him to do what he wanted to do. So it was an exciting time to be able to hang around with him and get to know him personally. And I was very fortunate to be one of those people on the inside in his life. Wow, I still to this very day wish I had just one day back to where I'd sit down and talk with him, but I'll see him again.
Wow. Well, did Elvis ever give you any career advice?
Yes. Wow. And it's something he told me one time that I applied to my life. When I had my first #1 hit, Devil in the Bottle, he was so excited for me. At 30, I never told Elvis that T.G.Sheppard was me. My real name was, at that time, was Bill Browder. And so he knew me as Bill. And he would run around Graceland singing my song, Devil in the Bottle, full voice. And I was just freaking out hearing him sing. He didn't know that was me singing that record. So one day I walk in the back door of Graceland, and he's sitting in the jungle room with his feet propped up on the coffee table. And when I hit the back door, I heard, Bill? And I said, yes, sir. He said, you could have told me you were that Sheppard guy on the radio singing that song I like. Why didn't you tell me? I said, Elvis, I'm working for RCA Victor Records. I'm recording for Motown. That's a conflict of interest between two labels. I was afraid I'd lose my job at RCA. And so therefore I couldn't tell you. He said, you fool, don't you know that I am RCA? And he was, because he was their biggest selling artist. But I don't know, those days with Elvis was just, gosh, incredible.
He gave you a tour bus, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, when my first record went #1, he called me up late one night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said, he always would say these words when he would call. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm sleeping. He said, I need you to get in the car and come out to Graceland. I said, right now? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I need you to come out here right now. It's important. Well, he was my artist at RCA because I was working for RCA. So I get in my car and I drive out there and I pull in the front door of Graceland, and Elvis is coming out of the front door with a hat and a cape on. This was back in those Shaft days. He loved that movie Shaft. And so he came out of the front door and he said, get in the limo. And I got in the car with him along with 2 or 3 of the other Memphis Mafia guys. I said, where are we going? He said, Dallas. I said, Dallas, Texas? He said, yep. I bought a small jet today and we're going to go in the small jet. I want to fly you out to Dallas, Fort Worth and show you the airliner that I bought from Delta, and I'm turning it into the Lisa Marie. We get on the plane, long story short, and about 30,000 feet, he looks at me and he says, by the way, I bought you a tour bus today to get you started in your new career.
Wow.
It'll be here tomorrow. And so we flew to Dallas that night. The tour bus was given to me in the air. And those 2 planes are parked next to each other now at Graceland. The small jet star that we flew on that night. And then the Lisa Marie, of course, is there.
Wow.
I had a chance to fly on the Lisa Marie many, many times after it was built with him. And but that's how the tour bus came about. It really informed me. People ask me all the time, what is the greatest gift Elvis ever gave you? Was it the tour bus? And I answer by saying this. No, that was not the most important gift. The tour bus was the catalyst for the greatest gift, and that gift was the gift of confidence that he gave me. Giving me a gift that large, a tour bus, I could not let him down. I had to succeed.
Wow.
For him to believe in me enough to do that gave me the gift of confidence. That was the greatest gift he ever gave me.
I was just imagining when you said if he called like 1 o'clock in the morning, get over here. It's just like, okay, if Elvis tells you to do something, you do it, right?
You better believe it. I mean, he was the king. He was the man. But he never did like being called the king. He always was, I said, he's such a spiritual guy. He said, there's only one king. I'm Elvis Presley, the singer. And I always respected that.
How shocked were you when he passed?
Very. I had just left him the night before. The tour was starting that day that they found him. And I had gone back to Nashville from Memphis. I knew that he wasn't in the greatest of health because of his weight. But I didn't expect him to die, not at 42. Come on, 42 years old. But you know the strangest thing, guys? He told me on more than one occasion, he said, I'll never make it past 42 or 43. He somehow knew that the brighter the star, the faster it can burn out. And yeah, I was shocked. I think I was in denial, like a lot of people were, for the first few months to a year, because he was still so visible with movies and music. You saw him everywhere. So for me, he was still here at that time. But then a year or two later, I just sat down one day and mourned and cried so hard, because it finally did hit me that I'd never see him again, but I know I will. So,
Well, getting back to your career, you ended up transferring labels, and then you had a string of #1 hits. How did your life start to change during that time?
Well, it was very difficult for me being a promotion executive and then crossing that line to become an artist anyway. So I had a lot of people to convince that I was worthy. It took several #1 records for me to be taken serious. It was an incredible time of my life to have had 21 number one hits, and 14 of them were in a row. 14 in a row is just what a run. I was fortunate to have great record producers, and I knew that they were taking me where I wanted to go. Kenny Rogers told me one time, he said, the way to be successful in this business is to surround yourself with people who know more than you do. And they will take you, they will teach you. And so I took Kenny's advice because I toured with him for years, and surrounded myself with great record producers and songwriters that gave me the great songs and the great productions that we had. But yeah, it was quite an exciting time to be doing network TV all the time. I mean, you'd be doing the Tonight Show or the Today Show or doing an award show, or I mean, it was just incredible time in my life to have all that unfold. But I had a long time to prepare myself for it. And the advice that Elvis gave me, I don't think I told you that. His advice was that if you ever forget where you came from, you're never going to get where you want to go. I may have told you that earlier, but I stayed true to the course of keeping the ego in check and working hard and being appreciative of the fans. And lo and behold, I was able to have the dream come true. But it was an exciting time having all those number one songs.
Well, you've done a lot of duets, and I want to ask about one in particular, which is so far from the norm. You duetted with Clint Eastwood on the song "Make My Day." So for the film Sudden Impact, it's just such a fun song. So how did that happen? What was Clint like, and what was that like for you to hear that that Clint Eastwood wants to do you for his soundtrack for his movie?
Well, I was performing in Lake Tahoe, Nevada at Harry's with Mickey Gilley and Johnny Lee on the Urban Cowboy Tour, the original Urban Cowboy Tour. And it was huge. You know, Travolta had come in to do the movie, and it was an exciting time for country music, as well as now. And I was performing in Lake Tahoe, and I'm sitting in the suite, and the operator called me up one day, and she said, "Mr. Sheppard." And I said, "Yes." She said, "There's a guy on the phone who says he's Clint Eastwood." And I said, "Yeah, right, sure." I'm thinking it's one of the guys in the band or crew playing a practical joke, because we always did that on tour. I pick up the phone. "Hey, how you doing, Clint?" And now when I heard his voice, I said, "Oh my, you really are Clint Eastwood?" And he said, "Yes, I am." So he said, "I just finished a movie called Sudden Impact, and there's a catchphrase from the movie called Make My Day. Go ahead, punk, make my day. Would you consider flying to LA tomorrow if I send a jet for you and record a duet with me of the song?" And I said, "I'd be honored." So the next day I fly to LA, and I'm waiting at the Record Plant recording studios, thinking that this big entourage was going to pull up at any minute. But a pickup truck pulls up, the same truck that he used in the bridges of Madison County, the red Chevy pickup. And the door slings open, and this tall drink of water gets out from behind the wheel by himself, walks in the front door and looks at me, and he says, "T.G., I'm Clint Eastwood." And I said, "I know, I'm a huge fan." And we spent that whole day together, 5 hours in the recording studio, recording that duet that became a hit record for me. One of the nicest people, very quiet, down to earth, low key, soft-spoken people that I've ever met. And just, it was the start of a great friendship with him. And it just, again, I was at the right place at the right time, and it happened. It was an incredible day in the studio, laughing and singing with him.
Wow. So later on, you become involved with Folgers, and you became their spokesperson. How did you get involved with that, and what all did you do with Folgers?
Well, you know, what happened was my attorney owned the Nashville Speedway and the Bristol Speedway racetracks. in Tennessee and Bristol, Virginia. And he called me up one day and he said, I'm forming a new race team and I want to name it after you. I want to call it the T.G.Sheppard Folgers Coffee Machine. And I'm going to Cincinnati to sit down with Folgers and see if they'll sponsor our race team. I said, I'm in, because I loved racing. I mean, I've always loved NASCAR. So we flew to Cincinnati and sat down with Folgers, and they not only sponsored one team, they sponsored two teams. We had the green decaffeinated car, and we had the red Folgers, and we named it the T.G.Sheppard Folgers Coffee Machine. So I spent 8-9 years as their spokesman and was involved in their commercial of the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. They sponsored the tour with the Judds and myself and Garth Brooks, the Folgers Waking Up tour on the Judds farewell tour. And Garth was just coming in and he was tearing them up. And he was a hard act to follow. Wow. But those days of having my own, it's like owning your own NFL football team, having a race team. Very exciting time with Folgers, and that showed me the importance of corporate sponsorship in your career. And we were one of the first artists to get involved and have our name on a race car. And since then, it's been Burt Reynolds and everybody's had their own race team, but very exciting time.
Well, you wrote the song, right? I mean, so is it typical that they let the performer write the jingle, or is it normally something that
there were actually several writers on that? I just changed a few words here and there and got credit, so which I appreciated that. But
yeah, they must have been the right words.
That worked. It worked. But you know, NASCAR and country music went so well together then as it does now, because the race fan is a country fan. They really are. They are dyed in the wool country fans. And we were able to really be propelled even further with our career because of Folgers and because of NASCAR.
We were going to ask that, yeah.
It was a very, very wonderful association with that company, and spent many years there.
Because you already had this great career, and then when you do this jingle and you're this whole other audience, and you're everywhere, so it's just astounding what the power of a commercial can have.
Well, you know, that commercial was in the early 80s and it still runs today.
Right. Well,
it's the TV medium isn't, radio is, you have to have it for a career. But when you are able to have television involved too in your career, and then have a race car on the racetrack every Sunday with your name on it, running around the track and winning big, we won a lot of huge. We won Daytona, we won Atlanta, we won Charlotte, we won all the big races. And to have been involved with, Rick Hendrick. I mean, I was involved with the biggest team owner there was, and then Jack Roush with Mark Martin. Wow. It was, I had to pinch myself again, just like I did when I first met Elvis.
Well, not asking specifics, but just for people who don't know, how does it work when you do a jingle? Does the performer get royalty every time it's played, or they give you just like a flat fee?
You usually get a flat fee, but I got lucky enough to have royalties come from that for years. So wow. It's quite a windfall for an artist to be able to have a commercial for, like with my wife Kelly Lang on the Ascension Hospital commercial. Sure. With I'm Not Going Anywhere, it was a windfall for her. So it's great to have that association with a big company like Folgers.
Right. Yeah, because back in my day, I was an actor and did a lot of commercials, and I had a few. One was a Doublemint gum commercial I did, and those were the days when commercial campaigns, like individual commercials, would run for years at a time, and so that's what a lot of people out there don't quite understand how that works and how lucrative it can be to just you just sort of, it's like pulling that slot machine handle and the jackpot hits, and
I know
it's like work versus reward it's an interesting comparison. How out of balance it can be, but boy, it's really nice when that happens. So but anyway, you have your own show. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
it's so incredible in your career that when things really start happening, it's like a domino effect.
Mm.
When that domino effect starts happening in your career, it's amazing, and it still even continues with me today.
Yeah, my gosh. Well, you now have your own show on Sirius XM Radio. Sorry, I'm getting my X's and S's mixed up there. How did that come about, and what can you tell us about it?
Well, I've taken some time away from Sirius right now because Kelly and I are getting ready to announce a very large project. And she probably was talking to you earlier that we are close to talking about, and it's something that we're going to do together. So I've kind of backed up from radio for the time being. I hope to return to the Sirius platform again in the future, maybe next year. But it came about, I became associated with Sirius XM years ago. I just celebrated my 4th year with them through Elvis Radio. There was the T.G.Sheppard show. It came live every Friday from Graceland in Memphis for 3 years. And then a year or so ago, I made the move over to Prime Country for an extra year to finish my contract out. And it again just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Sirius XM is still the greatest platform to hear music, one of them. And I was honored to have the T.G.Sheppard show on Sirius XM for 4 years.
Well, you keep saying right place, right time, but people find talent, people seek out talent. So that's it's not so much as fortune as you people wanting to work with you a lot. So you have to give yourself that credit. But you've got to interview some of the major giants in country music, like Reba and Barbara Mandrell, among others. So are there any that really stick out to you among all the people that you've interviewed?
Lionel Richie is Kelly said to you that when you mention big names, it sounds like you're name dropping, but we're in a business to where our friends are iconic people. Okay. So when I mention names, it's not name dropping. I'm proud of my friends that I have made in this business. I think one of my most incredible interviews was with Lionel Richie. And he's one of the most sincere, down-to-earth, real human beings in our business. And you can sense that when you're watching him on American Idol. I mean, you can sense that he's the real deal when he's giving these tips to the performers, and he's really sincere about telling them what they need to do with their careers. So I guess Lionel was one, Barry Gibb was one that was absolutely phenomenal to have on the show. Olivia Newton-John, was on my show. And of course, we recently lost her last year. But anytime that I was able to have a conversation, the one main thing with Lionel is that I always, when I interview the large names, I always try to use one question that will lead me down a different path that maybe the people or the fans didn't know about that person. And so in the middle of my interview with Lionel, I said, Lionel, I understand that before you joined the Commodores and started your music career, you were on your way to the ministry to preach. And he said, yes. And that opened the door for a discussion about his faith and about him as an individual down deep. And so he opened up with me about his faith and his family, his mom from Tuskegee. And it was an exciting interview because I explored another side of him that maybe people had never heard before. So I enjoyed interviewing people on my shows, but those are a few of the main ones that I was able to interview. Kid Rock was another one. He's a dear friend, and he's just he's a rebel. I mean, I love him because he marches to his own drum. But yeah, all those people, those names I mentioned, are just a few of some of the great ones that I was able to interview on the T.G.Sheppard show on Sirius XM.
Well, I do want to talk about you. We've mentioned duets before. You recently completed a song, "Bye Bye Love," where you appeared with Anne Margaret and Pete Townsend. Can you tell us about that? How did that come about? And what was your reaction when you heard that you were going to be performing with Townsend, in particular, and Margaret? So,
well, I got the phone call from the record label Cleopatra Records, and they're a great record label out of Los Angeles. And I've had projects with them before. So Anne had decided she wanted to do this duet project, and she picked 3 country artists that she wanted to record with. She picked the Oak Ridge Boys, and they did a duet with her. And she picked Mickey Gilley before he passed and did a duet with him. And I don't know how my name got in there, but I was one of the ones that she wanted to do a duet with. So we did the old Everly Brothers hit, Bye Bye Love. And so going in the studio to record that was exciting because it's Anne Margaret. I mean, I had met Anne years ago when she was a movie star with Elvis in movies, but I never knew her that well. But lo and behold, Pete Townsend of The Who plays guitar on the session. And I'm going, who would have ever thought a country artist would have their name next to Pete Townsend of The Who, let alone Anne Margaret? So again, it's just one of those dominoes that fell late in my career that came along. But doing duets is always a lot of fun. But when you get a chance to do them with iconic people like Pete Townsend and Anne Margaret, man, it don't get any bigger than that.
Well, you're also involved in many charities. Can you tell us about them?
My mother passed of Alzheimer's, and it was a very difficult time, and it's difficult for anyone who has in their family Alzheimer's. It's just trying to find a cure for that is one of my main dreams. And that's one of the organizations that I'm closely associated with. I'm also, being a Memphian for many years, closely associated with St. Jude Children's Home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what other place can a family go with a child that has cancer and never receive a bill and have everything paid for, from their accommodations to their food while they're there? It's just a wonderful, it's a wonderful thing. And I'll tell you another brief story that you don't know. But when I was a kid, starting out in music in my teens, I was able to stand next to Danny Thomas the day that he put the shovel in the ground to break ground for St. Jude. I was standing there along with Gary Puckett of the Union Gap, the singer. And so those are 2 of my main ones. Make-A-Wish, we're very big with them. We're very big in cerebral palsy. I mean, I think it's important for every performer to give back a little of what they have taken from this business. And you need to reach out and help those that need help. And I really and truly believe that the reason to have money and fame is to share it with those that need it the most. And so my life has been as a giver, not a taker. And I've received that from my mom, who told me years ago before she passed of Alzheimer's, you'll receive tenfold what you give in life. And so I have received much greater than tenfold when I give. So I enjoy helping people, whether they're friends, whether they're family, or whether they're strangers.
Very admirable. Well, you were honored. You had a street named after you in Humboldt. So how gratifying was that for you to be honored that way?
It's so strange. I told you earlier that I left home when I was almost 16. I was in my late teens, 15. I hitchhiked out of Memphis and down to Memphis to chase this dream. And a couple of 2 or 3 months ago, I was able to fly back into my hometown in a private jet. Who would have ever thought that a 15-year-old kid hitchhiking out of town with 60 cents in his pocket would come home one day and have a street named after him and have a monument erected, the Pathways Monument they have in Tennessee, in their name? I never would have believed that that could happen to me, that to leave town with 60 cents hitchhiking and flying back in town in a private corporate jet. Wow. Those dreams come far and few between, but if you believe strong enough, they can happen. It was a very exciting day to have the boulevard named after me, where I grew up, did all my dreaming, on the very street that now is called T.G.Sheppard Way. There was a little joint called Chiefs, and I was a car hop at that very place on that street when it was 21st Avenue. Never dreamed that someday I'd be able to look up and see that street named after me when I was a car hop as a teenager. So life is really wonderful. It's an incredible journey I have been on.
Well, you mentioned your upcoming project with your wife Kelly. Is there anything else you're working on as well?
Well, our tour schedule has just gone crazy. I attribute a lot of that to Sirius XM being on there every week, and of course the hit records that we were able to put together through the years, and having so many of those, they have enabled me to continue touring all these years later. Our 2024 schedule is starting to fill up. And it amazes me to walk out on stage and see a younger crowd of people in their 20s and teens singing the songs along with me. After all these years, these songs came before they were ever born, a lot of these kids. And to see the crowds get bigger and larger and to have them involved, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me to still be able to do what I love doing and still be doing it for so long. So touring is a big part of my life. Recording is a big part of my life. And the project that Kelly and I are getting ready to announce will be, you'll be able to, I can only tell you that you'll be able to see Kelly and I on a weekly basis. I'll give you that much information.
Oh, that's a great tease. That's a perfect tease.
That's a perfect tease, but we'll be announcing it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Matter of fact, we're going to be announcing it on national TV October the 3rd, I believe. I'm not really sure about that date, but it's exciting. So I'll be doing I'm just continuing what I've been doing for 47, 48 years, and to still be able to do it is wonderful.
Well, we can't wait to hear what it's all about. And like we mentioned to Kelly, if you want to come back on and talk about it when the time comes, we'd love to have you.
I would love that. I would love that. And visiting with you today is just great.
Well, you talked about how much you love your fans. So how can fans follow you on social media?
Well, we have all the social platforms. You have Twitter, which now is X. Why did you do that? X, you can reach us there. Instagram, Facebook, all those places, social media platforms. You can go and find me and my tour schedule at tgsheppard.com. Our news, everything we're involved in. You can also go to YouTube and see tons of videos of concert performances and interviews and things that are fun. And I hope that when people go to the T.G. Sheppard YouTube channel, they'll subscribe there. So all your social platforms, they can keep up with us there at T.G.
Well, T.G., thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you and hear all your stories. And again, like we said, welcome back anytime.
Thank you, guys. I have sure enjoyed visiting with you. Look forward to the next time.
Yes. Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a very special thanks to T.G. Sheppard. And please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.